I'd go for a walk and my muscles would feel like they were tearing. And then she said, I'd be on my laptop and I just being on my laptop would make my hands feel so bad I would start to cry. And that's that's what got me. So often when people talk about pain, when I try to describe my pain, it's easy for me to explain it in regards to like walking and things like that. It's much harder to explain why even sitting up or typing, reading, holding something, trying to write something on my phone, texting for long periods of time will make my hands hurt so much that like they're unbearable. I read this book and it was about chronic pain and romance. So beds have something to do with both of that. And I was going to film this review because I was like, well, I'm not feeling up to it. And then I was like, you know what? This is perfect. I might shell all of the things because me being in bed sounds like a terrible thing to edit and like constantly criticize myself. But I'm going to take a lesson from dear old Chloe and try to get a life and try to live within my capacity, but also understand that it's okay to advocate for myself and stuff like that. So I actually really liked this. I didn't love the beginning, so I didn't have the greatest hopes, but I continued because I'd heard great things, and I absolutely really loved it. Mostly because once we get into the first first quarter, once we get into them, initiating stuff and talking, there's no more miscommunication. They have arguments and they have other things, but they always talk through it, and it is so refreshing. No, they address the fact that they have trauma and they talk about it, and it's beautiful. And I thought at one point her health was gonna be the big secret at the end, because in a romance movie there's always that big secret that breaks them up so they can get back together. And I was like, oh crap, no, because she's insecure. So pretty much her story is 10 years ago she got pneumonia, and because of that, from complications, she developed fibromyalgia. And for the last 10 years, she has been in debilitating pain, and she's lost all of her friends and her fiance at the time. And now it's 10 years later, and she almost got hit by a car, and she was like, I need to get a life. I need to do more. So I think she moves out of her family's home, and she meets a very, very cute new superintendent at her flat. And he just happens to paint with the windows wide open, shirtless. So she gets a nice view. I have friends who have had less attractive people who do things in front of open windows, but she's in a rom-com, so she got that. And I really liked Red, and also Red is a 6'2" ginger tattooed man, because who else is named Red? The only thing that could have made this better if he just had the strongest Irish accent. Oh, that's not an Irish accent. In all capacity, that would have been perfect. He is a boy who is in an abusive relationship, and he deals with a lot of insecurity around it, and feeling like he needs to do it. And maybe it's just because I watched Abigail Thorne's video lately, and this was when she was presenting as male and specifically talking about abuse in men, and that video, wow, I probably think of it every day since I watched it. And this was coursing through my mind, which made it more impactful, even though obviously Chloe's experiences are closer to my own as someone who deals with chronic pain. I want to talk about chronic pain, but the thing is about chronic pain is that it manifests in many different ways. So one thing, for instance, we talk to her the fact that she's always in pain, but in her dialogue we don't really see that a lot. I might be presenting perfectly fine, you can't tell by the taper of my voice and stuff like that I'm in pain, and there's literally always a part of my body, the fact that my lower body is currently spasming a little bit um from pain, because it's muscle joint, so it's and I'm like, okay, well, we can't spasm too much so that people can't tell. And okay, is that okay? Yeah, okay. Um, my back, and I have heat on my back, and the things, and this is slightly weighted, which helps. I have I think 6 blankets on me. But I am in constant there's and she does talk about a scale, well, 6, and sometimes I get a 4, and I just I feel like the world is just sunshine, and that's true. I'm constantly in pain. But people who have anxiety or have written really viscerally about anxiety. I think specifically of Turtle All the Way Down, because John Green did such a great job of that. Like it's a continual thought process. And with chronic pain, like I'm never not thinking about the fact that my body is in pain, because every moment that I am doing something, I'm thinking about keeping my body upright. And instead, she chose to have her like almost faint a few times and things like that. And to me, this could work, but for me, like I've never faint. Well, that's not fully true. I stopped working after I fell down multiple times. But I fell down like in showers, and I kept on falling down in stairs because I was too dizzy and I missed steps and stuff like that. And I collapsed. And do not fall downstairs, especially at work. It is very painful. And you will have like a magenta bruise for so long. And that just elevates it. And then I was hospitalized because of pain and fibromyalgia, especially since it manifests in so many different ways. But to me, I don't know anyone who has fibro that has issue with fainting. Half of my thing is just like, we can do this, we can do this, we can do this. Ignore the leg, ignore the leg. You know, if you're in a meeting or if you're in a service or if you're saying something, you can't just like lay down on the floor or on the seat. Like you could, but like it would be very disruptive to everyone else if like, you know, you're having a conversation with someone you don't know very well and you're like, so can I sit on the stone floor now? Um, and we do have a scene in which Red is like, okay, yeah, and like brings her to sit in the corner, and then, you know, it just ends up mostly being an excuse for a sex scene. Um, and like, but I feel like most of the things to help her pain are mostly presented by him, which is great. But that also gives him like this Superman, like super attentive things. And like, so a month ago, I stopped filming because I didn't have enough energy to go on, which, while talking about chronic pain, I guess is apt. And often I push myself through, and that point, I think you can tell throughout a lot of this video, I didn't have the words, and I kept on slurring my words a little bit, and I kept on not having my mind. And to me, that will always be more obvious than to someone noticing, maybe, but I'll always be critical of myself. So I wanted to continue on now and talk about my final thoughts on Chloe Brown now that I've sat for a little bit, and yeah. So I did really, really like this book, and I think that the thing that I need to clarify, I didn't clarify at the beginning because I didn't know, is that Talia Hibbert does have fibro. And she has fibro that's very different than mine, but she does have fibro. So I did cut off some of this stuff because I was talking about how it specifically didn't relate to mine, and how I thought that someone who didn't experience it would be trying to represent it in a certain way. And I don't want to be doing that with like the, I know what fibro feels like and you don't, Talia. Yeah, not the vibe I want. But I do think that it's important to note that like everyone who has fibromyalgia will have different experiences than the others. The thing that I think that it was really good representation, but it's hard when representation has to represent a very divergent group of people with different unique symptoms and experiences and ways they had fibro. And that becomes much more apparent when there is so little representation for fibromyalgia. This is the only fictional book that really people can ever point to with someone with fibro, especially a main character with fibro, especially someone who is a romantic lead with fibro. So these are important things, and representation that, you know, it might not seem quite right or a little bit off for one person can be given much more a pass when it isn't the only one. And I think that that's kind of part of it that stuck with me. And yeah, for me, my biggest thing was that I thought that like the thing like fainting and stuff like that, it was an easy way to depict pain rather than the constant internal dialogue that I tend to have that tends to think, okay, what is taking an inventory of my body all of the time and how does that affect me? And that's kind of what I was showing. Like I have fallen down a lot of times, but it's never because I lost consciousness. It was because of a myriad of other things going on in my body. And fibro is a very unique, complex disorder that has many different things. So that's kind of what I was saying. Although with it being unique and complex also makes it very varied for every person who has it. Final thoughts I want to say, I really liked a scene in which, you know, he comes over and he's taking care of her, blah, blah, blah. He starts to kiss her and stuff like that. And she previously, like I said, I don't really have energy for sex or anything like that. And then she's like, oh crap. Because like her ex kind of broke up with her because of the fact that like, you know, he'd be like, my magic dick can heal your symptoms. and then he pulled away, and it was kind of a conversation around that. Like, just because someone is interested or something like that doesn't mean that they have the energy to do that. And I think it definitely can be related to friends and stuff like that. I haven't had a romantic relationship since I've gotten sick. Like her, I was in a relationship while I was getting sick. It was confusing. We didn't know what was going on. It led to my breakup, partly. And these symptoms tend to happen a lot. So, but it's very confusing to people to be like, okay, but you enjoy time with me, but like, why isn't that enough to push through, especially when symptoms are not physical? And yeah, that's kind of parts of the things that like I liked that Red was so like paid attention, but it also seemed like he did it really out of nowhere with no further like no reason, and that she didn't advocate for herself a lot, which is fine. There's a scene in it that she wants to go and hang out with people, and she's going to the coffee shop, and this person is late and all of these things. And like, I think that this would have been a perfect example of her kind of showing being broken down and stuff like that, because I'm really good at like sitting for a certain amount of period or doing something like that, but like I can already feel the back pain, I can already feel the things that are like kind of pushing me down, pulling me down. And I'm talking faster because I'm like, I need to get through this because I'm in pain. And like, so if someone is late and you have to sit longer, you have to do these things longer, then it can show a really good internal moment of what is going on in someone who has chronic pain, who is trying to spend half of their brain, 75% of their brain, to keep themselves one, and how that affects someone. And I really would have loved to see representation for that, because that is representation that's hard to convey and isn't understandable a lot. And that's why I used the example of anxiety earlier, because I think that is shown in the visualness of that, and that can be happen with people with fibro as well. It's not the same. I have anxiety as well, and it's not the same. It's not the same manicness to it and urgency to it, but it's the same amount of space in your brain, if that makes sense. And then what else do I want? I also said that it was like very female centric, so I thought that Chloe got way less development than Red. Like, we kind of just assumed like that she was our like person we were more trying to paint our canvas on. Like, she had her disability and she had other things about her, but a lot of her stuff was way less specific, and I think that was specifically because it was meant for a female audience, which I would have definitely preferred a little bit more brushstrokes into who she was as a person. In the end, I really enjoyed the story. I thought it was a refreshing take on romance, in which the central things were about people learning and growing, and that even though there was major issues and like there were breakups and miscommunication and stuff like that, the way that those were handled were not to add more drama. It was to actually have conversations about these. And after also reading her second book, Dani Brown, I also saw the same thing in that book. So it made me very excited to have it as something that the conflict was at the heart of it, about human centeredness and people recognizing the trauma and not sure if they could go past that trauma if that person was going to be on. Because just because you have trauma or just because you have hurt is something that you still have to make steps in a relationship to work through that. And often in relationships, trauma that you thought was done and dealt with comes back up again. And that's definitely true in these people who haven't been in relationships since abuse, haven't been in relationships since illness. So even though in many ways in their personal life they've moved past, they haven't necessarily in the very close dynamic that is a relationship. So I really appreciated that conversation and that it was really human centric in that as well. And I thought the representation was good and it showed many elements, and I'm very happy for it. Is it exactly a representation of my life? No, but that isn't something that I need to expect. If I want it, I should really read it. But I hope you have a great day. Tell me any books you have that have represented you or that represent disability or good romances with human-centric people. Anyways, have a great day, and I will see you next time. Bye.